On a cold Christmas night in Los Angeles, when the streets were wrapped in soft golden lights and the air carried the calm silence of families gathering indoors, something unusual was happening behind the high stone walls of a quiet Hollywood Hill home. It was the kind of night that felt gentle and magical, the kind that made people slow down and remember what truly mattered. But for Keanu Reeves, this night carried a kind of weight that reached far deeper than the holiday lights around him. He stood alone near the tall windows of his living room, staring at the city below as soft music played in the background. He held a small box in his hand, wrapped in simple brown paper with a thin red ribbon tied around it. It was not expensive or showy, because he never cared about that. The box was personal, and the meaning behind it had been building inside him for years, pressing on his heart every time he saw the woman he had quietly cared for from a distance. Keanu whispered to himself, almost in a breath he could barely hear, that tonight had to be the night he finally showed Sandra Bullock the truth he had carried for so long. It was a truth shaped by respect, by patience, by memories that never faded, and by moments he thought he had forgotten but never really did. He knew he had to tell her something that had lived inside him like a quiet echo, something he thought she should have known long ago. But even as he prepared himself, doubt held on to him like a shadow. What if he failed to say the right words? What if he brought weight to her holiday? What if the past felt too heavy between them? What if this gift only reminded her of things they had both tried to bury to protect themselves? As he stood there thinking quietly, he remembered the early days of their friendship, the laughter they shared on cold film sets, the warmth of the way she treated everyone with kindness, the calm feeling he carried every time she looked at him like she truly saw the person he was. Sometimes he wondered if the world even understood what she carried behind her smile, the struggles she never shared publicly, the responsibilities that silently weighed on her, the heartbreaks she survived by holding herself together with quiet strength. He had always admired her for that more than anything, and he knew that tonight, something inside him needed to honor that strength instead of hiding from it. He breathed out slowly, placed the small gift inside his coat pocket, and grabbed his car keys. He knew where she would be. Sandra had a habit every Christmas night. She never went to parties or loud gatherings. She preferred calm spaces where she could breathe and think. She would spend the first part of the evening with her family, then she would stop by a small house she kept in a quiet neighborhood near Griffith Park. It was not fancy or large. It was warm and filled with soft lights and books, and the smell of pine from the Christmas tree she always decorated herself. She liked to end the night alone there, watching old movies, drinking tea, and letting her thoughts slow down in the quiet. Keanu knew this because she had once told him that Christmas was the one night she allowed herself to remember everything she had survived and everything she hoped to become. When he arrived at her street, the air was cold enough that his breath floated in front of him like smoke. He parked his car a few houses away and walked slowly toward her place. He wanted to gather himself before knocking on her door. He was not nervous because of the gift itself. He was nervous because of what the gift meant, because it carried a piece of him he rarely shared with anyone. Because the last time they had been alone on Christmas, many years ago, something had happened between them that neither of them ever spoke about again. As he reached the front steps of her house, he paused. Soft, warm light spilled through the curtains. He could hear faint music inside, something gentle and old, the kind of melody that soothed broken places inside a person. He raised his hand and knocked lightly on the door, unsure if she would even be expecting someone. He heard footsteps inside, slow and a bit tired. And when the door opened, Sandra stood there wrapped in a soft gray sweater, her hair slightly messy as if she had tied it quickly after putting the kettle on. Her eyes widened when she saw him standing in the cold with his hands tucked in his pockets and a nervous smile forming on his face. She let out a small breath, a mixture of surprise and warmth. "Keanu," she whispered, her voice soft and low, the kind of tone someone uses when they are happy but caught off guard. "What are you doing here on Christmas night?" He shifted slightly, trying to find the right words without revealing everything too soon. "I wanted to see you," he said gently. "I know this is unexpected, but there's something important I need to tell you, and something I need to give you." Her expression changed, not in fear, but in curiosity mixed with something deeper, something emotional. She stepped aside to let him in, and as he entered, the warmth of her home wrapped around him instantly. The smell of pine, cinnamon, and soft candle wax filled the space. The Christmas tree stood glowing in the corner, decorated with simple ornaments. Some looked handmade, some old, all carefully placed by hands that loved quiet beauty. Sandra closed the door and leaned against it for a moment as if she needed to steady her thoughts. She glanced at him, noticing something different in his eyes, something unguarded. "You look like you've been thinking too much," she said with a slight smile. "Come in, sit, tell me what's going on." He followed her into the living room where a soft blanket lay over the couch and a half-finished mug of tea sat on the table. She motioned for him to sit, and he did, though the weight in his chest didn't ease. She sat across from him, her knees pulled close together, her hands wrapped around her warm mug. After a few silent moments, she asked quietly, "Did something happen? You're not usually this tense." He looked at her, his voice barely above a whisper. "I came because I've been holding something for too long, and I realized tonight that I couldn't carry it anymore without you knowing the truth." Her eyes softened, but her body tensed just a little, as if preparing herself for something unexpected. She cared for him deeply, but she also knew that sometimes truths could wound, even if spoken with love. Keanu reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the small, brown-wrapped box. He placed it slowly on the table between them, but he didn't push it toward her yet. Instead, he kept his hand resting lightly on top of it. "Before you open this," he said softly, "I need to tell you something I should have said a long time ago." Sandra swallowed, her eyes fixed on him with growing anticipation. "Keanu, what is it?" He took a deep breath, and for a moment it felt like the room itself held its breath with him. The gentle sound of the music, the faint hum of the heater, the quiet crackle from a candle, everything felt suspended. "You know how people talk about timing," he began slowly. "How sometimes life puts two people in the right place but at the wrong moment. We've had that, more than once. And every time I told myself that it was better to stay quiet, better to stay safe, better to protect what we had instead of risking it." Her heart pounded in her chest. She had felt those moments too, the ones between them that were never spoken about. The ones that lived in small glances, soft touches, long conversations, silent understanding. She had always wondered if he felt those unspoken things or if it was only her heart imagining them. Keanu continued, his voice low and steady. "But tonight, I realized that silence can become a kind of distance, and I don't want distance between us, not anymore." Sandra shifted slightly, her breath catching. "Keanu, what are you trying to say?" He looked at her with eyes filled with sincerity, fear, and warmth all at once. "I need you to understand something, something I never said clearly, something I've felt for years." She leaned forward, her voice trembling slightly. "Tell me." He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, a sudden vibration echoed through the room. Sandra's phone lit up on the table, flashing with a name she didn't expect to see. Her expression changed instantly. Fear flashed across her face, and she grabbed the phone with shaking hands. Keanu paused, watching her reaction with concern. "Sandra, is everything okay?" She answered the call, her voice tense, almost breaking. "Hello, yes, I'm here. What happened?" Her face drained of color as she listened. Her breath grew unsteady. Her free hand covered her mouth as if she was trying to stop a scream from escaping. Keanu stood from the couch, his heartbeat racing. "Sandra, what is it? What's wrong?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head slowly as if she didn't trust her own voice. Then, with visible pain, she whispered the words that stopped him cold. "Keanu, something happened, and I don't know how to handle this." The air tightened around them, the warm Christmas lights suddenly feeling too soft for the harshness of her trembling. Keanu took a step toward her. "Sandra, tell me." She closed her eyes, tears slipping down her cheeks. "It's about someone I haven't spoken about in years," she whispered. Keanu's chest tightened. He knew this wasn't about him anymore. Whatever was happening had the power to break everything they were about to share. And just before she spoke the next words, the gift between them sat untouched, full of meaning, its truth still hidden, waiting for the moment he feared might never come, the moment Sandra lowered her phone. The room seemed to shift around her, as if the soft lights, the warm tree, and the gentle music no longer belonged to the night they were having. Her breathing grew uneven, almost fragile, and her hands trembled as she tried to place the phone on the table without dropping it. Keanu stood near her, his eyes filled with concern, feeling the sudden distance that pain creates even between people who trust each other deeply. He didn't know what had happened, but he could see in her expression that it wasn't something small or manageable. It was something heavy, something she had carried alone for a long time, something she never wanted to revisit, especially not on a night like Christmas. He knelt slightly beside her, giving her space yet staying close enough to show he wasn't leaving her alone in the moment. "Sandra," he said gently, his voice steady even though worry pressed hard against him. Please talk to me. Whatever it is, you don't have to face this by yourself. She closed her eyes, trying to breathe through the panic building in her chest. Her mind was spinning so fast that she could barely put her thoughts in order. The call had dragged up memories she had tried to bury for years, memories tied to a person she once cared about, someone she had loved and lost in ways she could never express publicly. She opened her eyes slowly and looked at Keanu, but her voice barely came out at first. I wasn't expecting this tonight, she whispered shakily. I thought this part of my life was behind me. I thought I wouldn't have to face it again. Keanu stayed calm even as his heart raced. He knew he needed to let her move at her own pace, to let her unbury whatever was hurting her without pushing too hard. I'm here, he said quietly. Take your time, I'm not going anywhere. Her eyes softened with gratitude, a quiet look that showed how deeply she trusted him, even in the middle of something she still struggled to name. For a moment she tried to steady herself by holding her mug again, but her hands were shaking too much. Keanu gently took it from her and set it aside. Then she folded her arms around herself as if she needed to hold everything inside from falling apart. The call, she finally whispered, was about someone I haven't spoken about in years, someone who meant a lot to me before my life changed in ways I never expected. Keanu felt his chest tighten slightly, not out of jealousy but out of empathy. He knew Sandra well enough to understand that when she said someone meant a lot to her, she didn't mean it lightly. She didn't open her heart easily. She guarded it with care, with quiet strength, with walls built from a lifetime of loving people deeply and losing them just as deeply. Someone from your past? Keanu asked gently. She nodded slowly, tears gathering in her eyes again. Yes, she whispered. Someone I thought I lost forever, someone I thought was gone. Keanu didn't speak. He let silence fill the room so she could breathe through her pain without feeling rushed. The Christmas lights flickered softly on the tree, casting warm shadows on her face, highlighting the raw emotion she was trying to contain. I need to explain, she said after a long moment, wiping her cheek with the back of her hand. But it's painful, Keanu, painful in ways I never told anyone, and I don't know how to bring it up without losing myself in it. You don't have to protect me from the truth, he replied softly. If it hurts you, it matters to me. You're not alone. Her lips trembled and she exhaled shakily. His name was Michael, she whispered, her voice barely holding itself together. We were very close many years ago before everything in my career got overwhelming. He understood me in ways I didn't expect. We talked about life, about fear, about dreams, about things I never talked about with anyone else. Keanu listened closely, not interrupting her for even a second. But he struggled, she continued, her voice breaking. He struggled with things he didn't know how to talk about, stress, pressure, old wounds from his past. He hid it so well that I didn't realize how deep it went until one night when everything fell apart, and after that, he disappeared. I tried to find him, I tried to reach out, but he was gone, completely. I didn't know if he left by choice or if something happened to him. I just lost him. Keanu felt his throat tighten. He had seen Sandra smile through heartbreak before, but he had never seen her talk about someone like this. Not with this kind of pain, not with this kind of memory. He reached out slowly, placing his hand gently on hers, letting her feel his warmth, letting her know she had someone to lean on if she needed to. And tonight, she whispered painfully, they told me he's alive. The room fell silent. Keanu stared at her, stunned but trying to stay calm for her. He could feel how those words carried equal parts relief and fear. Alive, he repeated slowly. After all this time. She nodded, her tears falling freely now. He's alive, but he's not well. They said he's in a facility out of state, dealing with something serious. They only reached out to me because my name was on a list of people he once trusted. They thought I should know. They said he mentioned me, and that he asked if I ever forgave him. She covered her face with her hands for a moment, overwhelmed by the sudden weight of memories she had avoided for years. I don't know what to feel, she whispered through her tears. I'm relieved he's alive, but I'm terrified of reopening something I barely survived losing. I don't know why this is happening on Christmas night. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. Keanu took a slow breath, trying to gather his thoughts. He wanted to comfort her, to give her something stable to hold onto. But he also knew the timing of the call couldn't have been more cruel. It came right when he was about to speak the truth he had kept inside for years. Now, that truth felt almost fragile compared to the pain she was dealing with. Sandra, he said in a gentle voice, I can only imagine what this feels like, but you don't have to make any decisions right now. Not tonight. You've carried this alone for so long. Let me help you carry it now. She lowered her hands and looked at him. Her eyes were red, but the softness in them returned as she saw his sincerity. I'm sorry, Keanu, she whispered. You came here with something important to say, and I. He stopped her with a small shake of his head. Number tonight is about what you're going through. Whatever I brought is not more important than this. You matter, your peace matters, your healing matters. Her eyes filled again, but this time with a different kind of emotion. One shaped by gratitude, by comfort, by the quiet understanding that Keanu always gave her without expecting anything back. She reached out and squeezed his hand, not as someone seeking support, but as someone acknowledging the presence of someone who had always treated her with respect and patience. After a few moments of quiet, Sandra stood and walked toward the window. She pulled the curtain aside and looked out at the soft glow of the neighborhood lights. She needed air, even if she wasn't stepping outside. She needed a moment to piece herself together, to breathe through the storm of emotions that had taken her by surprise. Keanu stood a short distance behind her, giving her space while still staying close enough to show her she wasn't facing the pain alone. I feel guilty, she whispered, her voice fragile. I feel like I should be happy he's alive, but I'm scared, Keanu, scared of the past repeating itself, scared of opening wounds that never healed the right way, scared of hurting myself again. Keanu walked slowly to her side. He didn't touch her yet. He wanted her to choose whether she needed closeness or distance. Fear doesn't mean you're wrong, he whispered. It means you're human. No one expects you to walk back into something painful without hesitation. You don't owe anyone anything. Your heart has been through enough. She let out a shaky breath. I just don't know why they reached out now, after all these years. Keanu hesitated before answering, choosing his words carefully. Maybe because he needed closure, or maybe because life sometimes brings unfinished things back to us when we least expect it. She turned to look at him gently, but why tonight? Keanu held her gaze, his eyes full of empathy. Maybe because tonight you weren't alone. Her breath caught. Those words hit her unexpectedly hard, stirring something warm inside her chest, because he was right. She wasn't alone. Keanu was here, steady, patient, warm, the one person who always showed up when she needed someone even without asking. But just as she felt herself grounding again, her eyes drifted toward the table, toward the small, brown-wrapped box he had placed there earlier. Her heart tightened. She had forgotten, just for a moment, that he came here with something he wanted to share, something important, something he was ready to say before the call turned the night upside down. She pointed gently at the box. Keanu, what's in there? He looked at it, then back at her. There was a silent conflict in his eyes, a quiet debate happening inside him between timing and truth. He moved toward the table slowly, the gift still sitting exactly where he left it. He placed his fingers on it again, but he didn't lift it. This is something I wanted you to have tonight, he said softly, but I don't want to add more weight to what you're already feeling. But you came for a reason, she replied gently. And maybe your reason matters right now. Maybe I need to hear it or see it. Keanu hesitated. The night felt fragile again, like a thin glass window that could crack with the slightest wrong move. He picked up the gift carefully, the simple wrapping looking even smaller in his hand now. He turned toward her, his expression gentler than she had ever seen. I need you to know, he whispered, that what's inside this box is connected to something I've felt for a long time, something I never told you, something that might change how you look at our past. Her heartbeat quickened. His voice softened even more. Sandra, before you open this, I need to tell you what it means. But just as the words formed in his mouth, a loud knock hit the door. Both of them stiffened. Sandra froze, her eyes wide. Keanu stepped slightly in front of her instinctively. The knock came again, this time louder, urgent, desperate. Someone was outside her house on Christmas night. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there. And everything inside the room shifted again. The loud knock on the door echoed through the quiet house, cutting through the warm glow of the Christmas lights and the soft hum of the music still playing in the background. Sandra's breath stopped for a moment, and her eyes widened with a mix of fear and confusion. Keanu instinctively stepped closer to her, his body reacting faster than his thoughts. The knock came again, harder this time, shaking the calm that had settled between them only moments earlier. Sandra wrapped her arms around herself, trying to steady her breathing as memories and possibilities raced through her mind. "Sandra," Keanu whispered gently, "stay behind me." She nodded, her heart pounding so loudly it echoed in her ears. Keanu walked slowly toward the door, his steps careful and controlled, his eyes alert. He wasn't afraid, but he was cautious. People didn't show up at Sandra's house unannounced on Christmas night. This wasn't normal. This wasn't safe, and he knew she didn't need more fear added to the night already filled with emotional storms. As he approached the door, he paused and looked back at her. Her hands were trembling slightly, but she gave him a small nod to show she trusted him. He placed his hand gently on the doorknob but didn't open it yet. Instead, he raised his voice slightly so the person outside could hear him. "Who is it?" he said firmly, trying not to sound aggressive but making it clear that they weren't opening the door for just anyone. There was a brief silence. Then a voice responded, soft, shaky, and breathless. It was a female voice, fragile and strained. "Please," the voice said, "I need to talk to Sandra. It's urgent. Please open the door." Sandra felt her stomach twist. She recognized that voice. Not enough to identify it immediately, but enough to know it wasn't a stranger. It was someone familiar, someone connected to a part of her life she hadn't visited in years. Keanu looked back at her again. "Do you know that voice?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "I think maybe, but I'm not sure." The voice outside shook again. "Please, Sandra, I know you're inside. I wouldn't come here unless it was important." Sandra stepped forward slowly, drawn by the pain in the voice. She walked past Keanu and stopped just behind him, still allowing him to stand between her and the door. With a trembling breath, she said softly, "Who are you?" The voice outside answered immediately, almost as if she had been waiting for that question. "It's Emily." Sandra felt the ground shift under her feet. Her breath caught in her throat, and her hand flew to her mouth as she stumbled back a little. Keanu reached out quickly to steady her. "Sandra, who is Emily?" She looked at him with wide, shocked eyes. "Emily is Michael's sister." The name hit Keanu like a wave. Everything connected instantly. The phone call. The news that Michael was alive. The years of silence. The sudden reappearance of someone from her past. And now, on Christmas night, his sister was standing outside her door, asking to speak to her with desperation in her voice. Sandra's heart raced. She remembered Emily well. She had met her during the time she and Michael were close. Emily had always been sweet, warm, and protective of her brother. But after Michael disappeared, Emily had pulled away too. She had gone silent, unreachable, as if she couldn't face anyone who reminded her of what her brother had gone through. Sandra hadn't seen or heard from her since. Now she was here. "Tonight." Keanu squeezed Sandra's hand gently, grounding her. "Do you want me to open the door?" he asked softly. Sandra hesitated for a moment, her chest tight, her heart torn between fear of the past and the need for answers. She inhaled slowly, trying to steady herself. "Yes," she whispered. "Open it." Keanu nodded, released her hand, and carefully unlocked the door. He opened it slowly, keeping his stance protective and calm, ready for anything. Standing on the front porch was a woman in her late 30s, her hair messy from the cold wind, her cheeks red from crying or from rushing through the night air. She was wrapped in a long, dark coat, and her eyes were filled with worry, fear, and exhaustion. The moment she saw Sandra behind Keanu, her expression broke into something raw and emotional. "Sandra," Emily whispered, her voice trembling, "I'm so sorry to come here like this. I know it's Christmas, I know it's late, I didn't know where else to go." Sandra stepped forward slowly, her voice soft and shaky. "Emily, what happened? Why are you here?" Emily's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Can I come in, please? I won't stay long, I just need to talk to you." Keanu glanced at Sandra, letting her decide. Sandra nodded, her emotions swirling too fast to sort through. "Come in," she said quietly. Emily stepped inside, wiping her face with her sleeve. When she entered, her eyes shifted briefly to Keanu, not with suspicion, but with recognition. She knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. But she also seemed to sense immediately that he wasn't just a guest. He was someone who cared about Sandra deeply. "I'm sorry for showing up like this," Emily said again, her voice trembling as she stepped into the warm living room. "I wouldn't have if it wasn't serious." Sandra guided her to the couch, while Keanu stayed nearby, watching the two women carefully, making sure Sandra wasn't overwhelmed. Emily sat down slowly and took a long breath, as if trying to gather the strength to speak. Sandra sat across from her, her hands clasped tightly together. Keanu remained standing at a respectful distance, but close enough to offer support. "I got a call tonight," Emily began quietly, her eyes darting between Sandra and the floor. "From the same place that called you." Sandra's chest tightened. "They told me you were on Michael's list of trusted people," she whispered, "that he asked for you." Emily nodded. "Yes, he mentioned you. He mentioned you more than once." Sandra swallowed hard. "Emily, what happened to him? Why now? Why all of this tonight?" Emily rubbed her hands together, her fingers shaking. "Michael has been in a mental health facility for the last 2 years. He's been struggling with things that got too heavy for him to carry alone. I didn't know where he was for a long time either. When they finally contacted me, I thought he was gone, but he was alive. Barely, but alive." Sandra's eyes softened with pain. "And now?" Emily breathed in deeply, steadying herself. "He isn't stable. He has moments of clarity, moments where he remembers everything, including you, and moments where he's lost inside his own mind. Tonight, something changed." Keanu listened intently, feeling the heaviness building in the room. "They told me," Emily continued, her voice breaking, "that he asked for you by name. He said he needed to see you. He said there was something he had to tell you, something he never got to explain." Sandra felt tears gathering in her eyes. "Emily, I don't know if I'm strong enough to face him. I don't know if I can survive reopening everything." Emily leaned forward, her voice cracking. "I know, and I wouldn't ask you if it wasn't important, but he's not doing well. He's slipping. And I'm afraid if you don't see him soon, you might never get the chance." The room went silent. Keanu felt Sandra's whole world shift again, heavier this time, more painful, more real. This wasn't about the past anymore. This was about closure, about forgiveness, about wounds that never healed. After a long moment, Emily looked at Sandra with pleading eyes. "I came here because I didn't want you to hear this alone. I came because I thought, if you heard it from someone who loves him too, it would feel less frightening." Sandra covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. Keanu stepped closer instinctively, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. She leaned slightly into the touch without thinking, allowing herself a moment of grounding. Emily watched the two of them, her expression softening with a quiet understanding. "You're lucky," she whispered to Sandra. "You have someone who cares enough to be here with you through all of this." Sandra took a small breath and lowered her hands, looking at Keanu. Her eyes were filled with vulnerability, pain, and a quiet need for strength. He gave her a small, steady nod, letting her know silently that she wasn't alone. Then Sandra turned back to Emily. "What do you need from me?" she asked softly. Emily hesitated. Then she spoke words that made the air in the room tighten. "He wants to see you, Sandra. He asked for you again tonight. He said he can't rest until he speaks to you." Sandra's breath shook. Keanu's hand on her shoulder tightened gently, grounding her again. But before Sandra could answer, Emily reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to Sandra with trembling fingers. "What is this?" Sandra asked, unfolding it carefully. Emily whispered, "It's a letter. He wrote it yesterday. They gave it to me when they called. He asked me to bring it to you in case he loses clarity before you get to him." Sandra stared at the letter. Her heart pounded in her chest, every beat echoing like a warning. Keanu watched her quietly, his expression changing with concern. Sandra opened the letter slowly. She read the first line, and her entire expression changed. Her breath hitched, her hands shook, her eyes widened with shock, fear, and something she couldn't explain. Keanu stepped closer. "Sandra, what does it say?" She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "He didn't ask for me, he asked for both of us." Keanu froze. Emily looked at them in confusion. And Sandra, holding the letter with trembling fingers, whispered the final line aloud. "He said he knows our secret." The room fell dead silent. Keanu's eyes widened. Sandra's hands shook. Emily looked terrified without understanding why. And the truth Sandra thought she buried forever was suddenly alive again the moment Sandra whispered those last words. The air inside the room tightened like a string pulled too far. Keanu's expression froze as if time itself had stopped moving. Even the warm glow from the Christmas tree seemed to dim, casting softer shadows across the room as silence stretched painfully between the three of them. The letter trembled in Sandra's hands, and she kept staring at the words as if they might change if she blinked. But they didn't. They stayed exactly the same, heavy and sharp like a truth breaking through years of silence. Emily looked between them, confused and worried. "What secret?" she asked in a trembling voice. "What is he talking about? I don't understand." Sandra swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling in heavy breaths. Her voice barely came out. "Emily, I don't know how to explain this, but there was something that happened years ago, something only three of us knew about, me, Keanu, and Michael." Keanu stepped closer to Sandra slowly, his expression no longer calm. There was something serious in his eyes, something protective mixed with tension he could no longer hide. "Sandra," he whispered gently, "let me see the letter." She hesitated, her body shaking, but she handed it to him with trembling fingers. Keanu took it carefully, unfolding the paper with slow, deliberate movements as if rushing would break the fragile moment even more. He read the words, his eyes scanning each line, and the deeper he went, the more his jaw tightened. Sandra watched him, unable to breathe properly, her hands wringing together nervously. After a long moment, Keanu folded the letter back up and handed it to her. He didn't say anything yet. Instead, he walked a few steps away, running a hand through his hair as he tried to steady himself. Sandra could tell he was struggling, not with fear, but with memories he had buried just as deeply as she had. Emily looked overwhelmed. "Please," she whispered, "I'm not trying to intrude, but I need you to tell me the truth. I'm his sister. I deserve to know what's happening." Sandra sat slowly on the couch as if her legs couldn't hold her weight anymore. Keanu remained standing, staring at the floor, his shoulders tense. The night had taken a turn neither of them expected, and the secret they had kept hidden for so long was no longer safe behind silence. Finally, after several long seconds, Sandra spoke. "Emily," she whispered, "years ago before Michael disappeared, something happened between him and Keanu. Something painful, something that changed everything." Emily leaned forward, her face pale. "But what happened?" Sandra closed her eyes for a moment, searching for strength. When she opened them again, the pain inside them was unmistakable. Michael blamed himself for hurting Keanu, but the truth is, he didn't hurt him. He hurt himself trying to protect us. Keanu's head turned sharply toward her, his eyes meeting hers with a mix of surprise and understanding. He walked back to Sandra slowly and sat beside her, his knees close to hers, their connection strong even in the middle of the emotional storm. "We were all close then," Sandra continued softly. "Closer than people knew. Michael trusted us, he talked to us, he leaned on us. But he also carried things alone. He had a painful past that he tried to hide from everyone. He didn't want to burden anyone, but one night, everything collapsed." Keanu's voice entered the moment quietly, his tone filled with heavy memory. "That night, we found him in a place he shouldn't have been," he whispered. "He was overwhelmed, broken. He didn't know how to deal with everything he was feeling. He didn't ask for help because he thought he didn't deserve it." Sandra nodded, tears forming again. "We stayed with him. We talked to him for hours. We tried to help him understand that he wasn't alone, but something inside him cracked. He said things he regretted. He cried in ways I've never seen him cry, and by morning, he was gone." Emily's hands covered her mouth as her eyes filled with tears. "I never knew," she whispered. "I knew he struggled, but I didn't know he let either of you in. He never told me." "Because he regretted it," Keanu said quietly. "He felt ashamed for breaking down in front of us. He thought he had ruined everything. He thought he had shown us too much of his pain." Sandra added softly, "And before we could reach out again, he disappeared. No note, no warning, nothing." Emily looked down, her shoulders shaking. He never said any of this. All he told me was that he had done something terrible, that he had betrayed people who cared about him. I thought he hurt you. I thought he did something unforgivable." Keanu shook his head gently. "He didn't hurt us. He never did. He hurt himself more than anything, and we never had the chance to tell him the truth." Emily wiped her tears, her face pale from shock. "But what is the secret?" she whispered. "What does he think happened?" Sandra hesitated, exchanging a painful glance with Keanu. She tried to calm her breath, but the weight of the truth pressed against her chest. "The night he broke down," she finally whispered. "He told us something about his past, something he never said to anyone else, and he begged us to keep it between the three of us. He said if anyone else knew, he wouldn't survive it." Emily's eyes widened. "What was it?" Keanu spoke this time, his voice quiet but firm. That part isn't our story to tell, it's his. If he wants to share it with you, he will, but we can't break his trust, even now. Emily looked torn, but she nodded slowly. I understand, she whispered. I wish I had known. I wish he had trusted me too. Sandra touched her hand gently. He loved you so much. He wasn't trying to hide from you. He was trying to protect you from the pain he carried. The room fell silent again, but this time it wasn't an empty silence. It was full of grief, regret, and the weight of things left unsaid. After a long moment, Emily took a steadying breath. There's more, she whispered. Something I didn't tell you yet. Sandra tensed. Keanu watched her carefully. What is it? Sandra asked quietly. Emily reached into her coat pocket again, her fingers trembling, and pulled out a second paper. This one wasn't folded. It was a printed form, medical, official. And when Sandra saw the top line, her heart dropped. He signed a release form, Emily said, her voice breaking. He wants his 2 emergency contacts notified if anything happens to him. Keanu's stomach tightened. Who did he list? Emily handed the paper to Sandra. Sandra looked at it, her eyes scanning the names. She froze. Her hand shook violently. Oh my God, she whispered. Keanu, he put us. Emily nodded, tears falling. Both of you. He listed you as the 2 people he trusts most, the 2 people he wants by his side if something goes wrong. Sandra couldn't breathe, her chest ached. The weight of it all felt unbearable. Keanu took the paper gently from her hand, his jaw tightening, his breath deepening as he processed the meaning behind it. This wasn't just a request to talk, not just closure, not just a moment of clarity. This was something deeper, something urgent, something final. Emily's voice broke into the tension again. They said he's not stable tonight. They said he keeps drifting in and out. They said he insisted on giving them your names. Sandra clasped her hands together, her entire body shaking. Emily, please tell me he's not. But Emily's silence said everything. Keanu stepped closer to Sandra and placed his hand on her back, steadying her firmly. She leaned into him, her body trembling as fear and grief surged through her. After several painful seconds, Emily whispered, They said he might not have much time. Sandra gasped as tears ran down her cheeks. Keanu pulled her closer instinctively, his arm around her shoulders now, grounding her as her world spun out of control. She pressed her forehead against his chest, her breath shaking, her tears soaking into his shirt. He held her firmly, his own eyes burning with emotion. Emily watched them, her own tears falling silently. She knew she had dropped a weight into their lives, one they didn't deserve on Christmas night. But she also knew she had no choice. Michael's last moments of clarity had led him back to the 2 people he believed had saved him once, and he wanted them near him now when his strength was fading again. You need to come, Emily whispered. Not tonight, but soon, maybe tomorrow morning, maybe even tonight if you can. He's slipping fast. He keeps saying he needs to tell you something before it's too late. Keanu tightened his hold on Sandra. We'll go, he whispered, his voice steady and sure. We'll go see him. Sandra nodded against his chest, her tears streaming. Yes, she whispered, her voice breaking. We'll go, we have to. Emily sighed with relief, wiping her face again. Thank you, I didn't want to face this alone either. Keanu pulled back slightly, keeping his hands gently on Sandra's arms to steady her. He looked at Emily. We're with you, we won't let you go through this alone. Sandra lifted her head slowly, tears glistening on her cheeks, her breath uneven but grounding. She looked at Keanu with eyes full of fear and gratitude. But as she wiped her face, her gaze drifted to the small box still sitting on the table, Keanu's gift. Untouched, unopened, and now wrapped in the weight of everything that had just happened. She looked back at him slowly. Keanu, she whispered weakly, before we go, I need to know, what were you going to tell me tonight? What's in that box? Keanu looked at the gift. And for the first time that night, his expression shifted into something raw and vulnerable. He reached for the box again. Slowly, carefully, but before he could speak, Emily's phone rang suddenly. She looked down at the screen. Her face drained of all color. It's the facility, she whispered. They're calling again. Sandra gasped. Keanu froze. Emily answered the phone with shaking hands. Hello, yes, this is Emily. Her expression broke. Her hand covered her mouth. Her body collapsed into the couch. And she whispered, "No, no, please, not now, please." Sandra felt the world drop beneath her feet. Keanu's breath stopped. Emily's voice trembled through a sob as she delivered the words that shattered the room. "They said he slipped into critical condition, and he's asking for you both now." Everything inside Sandra and Keanu broke at once. And the Christmas night that began with a quiet gift was now turning into a race against time. The moment Emily whispered those words, the room seemed to tilt around them, as if the warm glow of the Christmas lights could no longer hold the weight of what had just been said. Sandra felt her throat tighten so sharply that she couldn't breathe for a moment. Keanu, who had been steadying her only seconds earlier, felt his own heartbeat slam inside his chest. The quiet calm of the night had shattered completely, turning into a rush of urgency neither of them were emotionally prepared for. Emily lowered the phone slowly, her hand shaking violently, her face pale with shock. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she tried to steady her voice, but the words broke apart as she spoke. They said he keeps calling your names," she whispered through trembling breaths. "He keeps repeating, 'Bring them, please, bring them.' They don't know how long he has, but they told me he's scared, he's confused, and he doesn't want to go without seeing you both." Sandra pressed a hand to her mouth as a sharp sob escaped her. The sound tore through the room, fragile and raw, and Keanu moved instantly, wrapping his arms around her again, pulling her against his chest. She sank into him, her face buried in his shoulder, trembling so deeply he could feel it vibrating through his own body. He held her tightly, grounding her, steadying her with the warmth and calm strength she desperately needed. Emily watched them through tears, guilt flickering across her face as she wiped her cheeks. "I didn't want to ruin your night," she whispered helplessly. "But I didn't want you to find out too late. I didn't want him to be alone." Keanu shook his head gently, his voice low but steady. "You didn't ruin anything. You did the right thing. We needed to know." Sandra slowly lifted her head from his shoulder, wiping her tears with trembling hands. "We have to go," she whispered breathlessly. "Right now, we have to go." Keanu nodded without hesitation. "I'll drive." Emily stood quickly, her voice cracking. "The facility is 2 hours away. They said they'll keep him stable if they can, but they also said he fades in and out. He might forget where he is, he might panic, but he keeps saying your names over and over." Sandra's heart shattered with every word. Keanu grabbed his coat from the chair, then helped Sandra put hers on when her shaking hands couldn't find the sleeves. The small Christmas gift he had brought for her still sat on the table, untouched, forgotten in the rush, wrapped in a silence heavier than before. He glanced at it for a moment, his eyes filled with regret and fear, but there was no time now. Whatever truth he had wanted to share would have to wait. They moved quickly toward the door, Emily leading them. But just as Sandra reached for her keys, her knees buckled slightly, her breath catching in a sudden wave of panic. Keanu caught her instantly, steadying her with both hands on her arms. "Sandra," he said softly, "look at me." She lifted her tear-filled eyes to his. "You're not doing this alone," he whispered. "I'm right here every step. You don't have to be strong by yourself." She exhaled shakily and nodded, grounding herself on his voice. Emily opened the front door, and cold night air rushed inside. The quiet street felt too calm for the chaos exploding inside their hearts. The world outside hadn't changed, but everything inside them had. They hurried to Keanu's car. Emily climbed into the back seat, her hands gripping her phone tightly, waiting for updates. Sandra sat in the passenger seat, her hands trembling, her breath uneven, her mind racing through memories she had tried to bury for years. Keanu started the engine with steady hands, even though his own heart was pounding painfully. As they drove off into the night, the road ahead stretched with quiet darkness, illuminated only by the occasional streetlight. The silence inside the car was heavy, broken only by the soft sound of Sandra trying to control her breathing. After several minutes, Sandra finally found her voice. It was small and fragile. "Keanu, what if we're too late?" He glanced at her gently. "We won't be. He asked for us. That means he's holding on. He's waiting." She closed her eyes tightly, tears streaming again. "I don't know if I'm strong enough to face him. The last time I saw him, he was broken, hurt, scared, and I couldn't help him. I couldn't protect him." Keanu reached over and gently placed his hand over hers. "You were there for him when he needed someone. He trusted you. He still does. That matters more than you think." She squeezed his hand back weakly, drawing strength from the simple contact. "I just don't understand why he wants us both. After everything, after so much time. Keanu took a slow breath, his eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. Because sometimes people hold on to the moments that saved them, he said quietly. Maybe we gave him something that night he never forgot. Sandra leaned her head back against the seat, her voice trembling. I was so cruel to myself afterward, telling myself I should have done more, telling myself I failed him. Keanu shook his head. You didn't fail him. And you, she whispered, turning slightly toward him. You were hurting too, you never talked about it, not once. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel with his free hand. I didn't want to make it harder for you, he said softly. You were trying to heal, I didn't want to add my pain to yours. She looked at him with tear-filled eyes. And I didn't want to make it harder for you, so we both stayed silent all these years. Keanu gave her a small, sad smile. Maybe tonight that silence ends. Emily leaned forward from the back seat slightly, wiping her eyes again. He talked about you two for so long, even when he wasn't stable. He kept saying you were the two people who saw him, really saw him, not the version he pretended to be, not the version the world judged, just him. Sandra's breath broke again. Keanu swallowed, his chest tightening. Emily continued softly. He said you saved his life once, even if he disappeared afterward. And now, he wants to say something he never said. He said he can't rest if he doesn't. Sandra covered her mouth as tears spilled over. Keanu squeezed her hand again gently. Time passed slowly as they drove. The road curved through quiet neighborhoods, long stretches of highway, and dark valleys where the only sound was the distant hum of the tires. Sandra's breathing slowly steadied, though fear lingered in every exhale. Keanu stayed focused, steady, his calm presence anchoring her. As they got closer to the facility, the lights of the small town became visible through the trees. The clock on the dashboard glowed faintly. It was much later than any of them realized. Emily checked her phone again. No new messages, no updates. Her anxiety grew sharper. What if he slips again before we get there? She whispered to herself, her voice cracking. He won't, Keanu said gently but firmly. He's waiting. Sandra wiped her eyes and looked at him quietly. You sound so sure. He nodded, because I know what it feels like to hold on for someone. Her breath caught. Their eyes met in a brief moment that held more emotion than either of them could handle. He looked away first, returning his focus to the road, but Sandra's gaze remained on him for a few seconds longer. Finally, they arrived at the facility, a large building surrounded by quiet, dimly lit grounds. The parking lot was almost empty. The night air was cold, sharp, and silent as they stepped out of the car. Sandra felt her legs weaken again, but Keanu took her hand before she could stumble. His grip was firm, steady, reassuring. Emily walked slightly ahead of them, her breath quick and shallow, her eyes searching for any sign of movement inside the building. As they approached the entrance, the automatic doors slid open slowly, revealing a nurse standing inside, waiting for them. Her expression was calm but serious. Are you Sandra, Keanu, and Emily? She asked gently. Emily nodded quickly. Yes, we're here for Michael. The nurse nodded. He's still with us, but his condition is unstable. He's been calling your names repeatedly. We're doing everything we can to keep him calm. Sandra's hand clutched Keanu's a little tighter. Can we see him? Keanu asked softly. Yes, the nurse said. But I need to prepare you. He may not look or sound like the Michael you remember. He's been drifting in and out of clarity all night, but he's still aware enough to know he asked for you. Sandra felt her breath shake again. The nurse continued. He said he has something he needs to tell you, something very important. Keanu nodded slowly, his heart pounding. Take us to him, he said gently. The nurse turned and began walking down a long hallway. Emily followed, wiping her tears. Sandra and Keanu walked side by side, their hands still intertwined. The hallway felt too quiet, too sterile, too painful. Each step felt heavier than the last. As they reached the end of the hall, the nurse stopped at a door with a small window. She turned to them. He's in here, she whispered. Sandra's breath caught in her throat. Keanu squeezed her hand once more. Emily placed a trembling hand on the door. The nurse slowly pushed it open. And inside the dim room, on a small bed surrounded by soft beeping machines, Michael lay motionless, eyes open, breathing weakly. But when he saw them standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with tears. His voice cracked into a whisper. "You came." Sandra gasped. Keanu froze. Emily burst into tears. And Michael whispered the words that changed everything. "I remember the truth." The moment Michael whispered, "I remember the truth," the small room seemed to shrink around them, pulling all three of them closer into a space filled with memories, fear, love, and years of silence. The machines hummed softly, their quiet beeping the only steady sound in a night that had broken open every hidden emotion they had ever carried. Sandra felt her heart stumble painfully, her breath stopping inside her chest as she stepped toward the bed, her legs almost too weak to move. Keanu stood still for a moment, his eyes softening with a sorrow he had kept buried for years. Emily covered her mouth with a trembling hand as tears slid down her cheeks. Sandra took the first step forward, then another, then one more until she reached the side of Michael's bed. She lowered herself slowly into the chair beside him, her hands trembling as she reached out toward him. Michael's fingers, thin and weak, moved shakily to meet hers. The moment their hands touched, a long, shuddering breath escaped him, as if her presence had loosened a weight inside him he had been carrying too long. Keanu moved to the other side of the bed and stood quietly, his eyes locked onto Michael's. There was no anger in him, no resentment, no judgment. Only a soft, patient sadness mixed with compassion. Emily stood at the foot of the bed, tears streaming silently as she watched her brother struggle to speak. Michael swallowed slowly, his breath hitching, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't think you would come," he said weakly. "I thought I would leave this world without ever seeing your faces again." Sandra squeezed his hand gently, trying to steady her voice even though her heart was breaking inside her chest. "We're here, Michael. We're right here." His eyes glistened with tears as he looked at her. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For everything, for disappearing, for leaving you both without answers. I thought I was protecting you." Keanu leaned closer, his voice calm and gentle. "You don't have to apologize to us. You were hurting. We knew that." Michael closed his eyes briefly, overwhelmed by the kindness in Keanu's voice. When he opened them again, he looked between the two of them, his breath trembling. "You don't know how much that night changed me," he said. "I thought I ruined everything. I thought I broke something between the three of us. I thought you would hate me forever." Sandra shook her head quickly, tears falling. "No, Michael, never. We never hated you." His eyes filled again. "I remember it now," he whispered. "I remember what happened. I remember the secret I told you, the one I swore you to keep." Keanu glanced at Sandra for a moment, then looked back at Michael. "Your story is safe. We never told anyone, not once." Michael's eyes softened with relief. "I know," he whispered. "I know you kept it. I can feel it." Emily wiped her tears. "Michael, what was the secret? All these years I thought you didn't trust me." Michael turned his head slowly toward his sister, his eyes filled with a sad tenderness. "Emily, I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to hurt the way I hurt. I didn't want you to know the things that broke me. You had your own life, your own battles. I didn't want you to carry mine." Emily let out a shaky breath. "I would have carried anything for you." Michael gave her a weak smile. "I know, and that's why I didn't want to put that weight on you." Sandra leaned closer, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Michael, you said you remember the truth. What truth?" He looked at her with eyes that held years of silence, regret, and unspoken wounds. "The truth about that night," he whispered. "The truth about why I broke down, the truth about what I felt, and the truth about what I saw between the two of you." Keanu and Sandra both froze. A deep, quiet tension settled in the room. Michael breathed slowly, painfully. "Do you remember?" he whispered. "After I broke down, after I told you everything, the two of you stayed with me all night. You talked to me, you helped me breathe. You held my hands when I couldn't stop shaking. But there was a moment when you thought I was asleep." Sandra felt her heart pound against her ribs. Keanu's breath softened, his eyes lowering slightly. Michael continued, his voice fragile. "I saw the way Keanu looked at you, Sandra. The way his eyes softened, the way he tried to hide his feelings because he didn't want to make things harder for me." Sandra couldn't breathe. Keanu's hand tightened at his side. Michael turned his gaze to Keanu. "And you," he whispered. "You thought I didn't see it, but I did. I saw the fear in your eyes, the fear of hurting me, the fear of losing our friendship, the fear of your own heart." Keanu swallowed hard, unable to speak. Michael looked back at Sandra. "And you looked at him the same way, the same gentle way, the same quiet way. You both loved each other, but neither of you said a word because you didn't want to hurt me while I was breaking." Sandra blinked through tears, her heart twisting painfully. "Michael, we didn't want to take anything away from you." He shook his head slowly. "You didn't take anything. I was already falling apart, and you tried to hold me together when you should have been holding each other." Keanu finally found his voice. "Michael, you were our friend. We cared about you. We didn't want to confuse anything." Michael let out a weak breath, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "I should have told you then that I wasn't angry, that I wasn't jealous. I was grateful, grateful that you had each other. Grateful that you had something pure, something gentle, something that didn't break you the way my past broke me." Sandra cried silently. Keanu's eyes glistened. "The truth," Michael whispered, his voice trembling, "is that I left because I didn't want to ruin what you had. I didn't want to be the broken person between two people who loved each other silently." Keanu shook his head slowly. "Michael, you didn't ruin anything." Michael's breath grew weaker, but his eyes stayed bright with emotion. "And all these years, I carried this guilt. I thought I destroyed your lives, but tonight when they said you were coming, I remembered. I remembered the truth. You loved each other, and I left because I wanted you both to be free to find that love without me in the way." Sandra's breath broke painfully. "Michael, we never stopped caring about you. You mattered more than you ever knew." Michael smiled faintly. Now I know, and I'm sorry for leaving without saying goodbye." Keanu leaned forward, his voice breaking slightly. "You don't have to apologize, we're here. We made it in time." Michael's eyes softened. "I wanted to see you, to tell you that I'm not afraid anymore, that I forgive myself, and that I want you both to forgive yourselves too." Sandra nodded through tears. "We forgive you completely." Michael reached a trembling hand toward Keanu, who gently took it. "Take care of her," Michael whispered. "She's stronger than she knows, but she needs someone who sees her the way you do." Keanu's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "I promise." Michael turned his gaze to Sandra one last time. "And you, don't be afraid to love again. Don't be afraid to let someone stay." Sandra leaned close, brushing her hand against his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Michael took one last, shaky breath. His eyes softened. His hand loosened inside theirs. And with a final whisper of peace, he was gone. Emily broke into sobs, collapsing against the foot of the bed. Sandra cried silently, leaning into Keanu as he wrapped his arms around her. Keanu held her tightly, his own tears falling as they mourned the friend they lost and the years they wished they could rewrite. The nurse entered quietly after a moment, her expression gentle, respectful. She gave them time to cry, time to breathe, time to say goodbye. When they finally stepped out of the room, Sandra leaned against the wall, her heart aching but strangely lighter than before. Keanu stood beside her, silent but steady. Emily hugged them both tightly, whispering through tears, "Thank you for coming, for giving him peace." They walked outside into the cold night air. Snow had started to fall softly, covering the ground in a quiet, gentle layer of white. Sandra wrapped her arms around herself, shivering lightly. Keanu took off his coat and placed it around her shoulders without hesitation. She looked up at him, her eyes red but filled with something softer now, something like clarity. "Keanu," she whispered, "tonight everything changed." He nodded slowly. "Yes, it did." She took a small step closer. "I don't want to hide anymore, not from the past, not from you, not from what I feel." His breath softened, his voice low and warm. "I don't want to hide either." Their eyes met in a quiet moment filled with years of silence, unspoken love, and shared healing. There was no rush, no urgency, just the gentle truth they had held inside for too long. Sandra reached for his hand. He intertwined his fingers with hers. The snow continued falling around them, gentle and peaceful. Keanu looked at her with a soft smile. "When we get home," he whispered, "I want you to open your Christmas gift." She smiled through tears. "I will." And as they walked to the car hand in hand, the night felt different, not lighter, not free of pain, but filled with a new beginning born from honesty, healing, and a love that had waited patiently through years of silence. The next morning, as sunlight touched her living room, Sandra opened the small brown-wrapped box with shaking hands. Inside was a simple silver ring on a thin chain, and a small handwritten note. The words were soft, gentle, and exactly what her heart had always known. I never stopped caring about you. I just waited for the right time to tell you. When Sandra looked up, Keanu was standing in the doorway, watching her with quiet hope. She walked to him slowly and wrapped her arms around him. And for the first time in years, they let the truth stay.